Unified Human Flourishing, a comprehensive human operating system. Preface. This work is not a set of opinions, nor a motivational framework, nor a philosophical exercise meant to be admired and forgotten. It is an attempt to describe a functional architecture of human life. At its core, it makes a simple claim. Human life is not random, it is structured, and that structure can be understood. Every human being operates under the same constraints. Time is finite and irreversible. Attention is limited and directional. The body is biological and fragile. Relationships are interdependent systems. Language constructs shared reality. Emotion governs internal experience. Knowledge shapes perception. Meaning stabilizes existence. Execution determines outcomes. Material security defines the baseline of stability. Most suffering does not come from lack of intelligence or effort. It comes from misalignment between these systems. This framework attempts to unify them, not as ideals, but as interacting systems that produce lived reality. The goal is not perfection. The goal is coherence, a life where internal structure and external behavior are aligned enough to produce stability, clarity, and forward motion. This is the unified theory of human flourishing. Table of Contents. Chapter 1, Time, Attention, and Opportunity Cost. The irreducible foundation of all human experience. Chapter 2, Love, Relationships, and Community. Relational systems as emotional infrastructure. Chapter 3, Physical Health, Safety, and Vitality. The biological constraint layer of human capability. Chapter 4, Service, Generosity, and Provision. The transformation of capacity into contribution. Chapter 5, Truth, Communication, and Integrity. Language as the architecture of shared reality. Chapter 6, Knowledge, Wisdom, and Intellectual Growth. Cognition, Belief Formation, and Adaptive Understanding. Chapter 7, Emotional Mastery and Inner Peace. Internal Regulation Systems and Psychological Stability. Chapter 8, Purpose, Meaning, and Spiritual Connection. Existential Structure and Directionality of Life. Chapter 9, Responsibility, Focus, Dedication, Discipline, and Excellence. Execution Systems that Convert Intention into Reality. Chapter 10, Material and Financial Security. Stability Infrastructure and Reduction of Survival Uncertainty. Unified Human Flourishing. Chapter 1, Time, Attention, and Opportunity Cost. 1.0 The foundational claim of human life. Everything a human being will ever experience, love, success, failure, health, mastery, regret, meaning, is constructed from a single input, a finite sequence of irreversible moments. Time is not just a resource, it is the substrate of existence. Every thought you have ever had, every relationship you have ever formed, every skill you have ever developed, and every regret you carry is a consequence of how your limited time was allocated. This leads to the foundational principle of this entire framework. Time is the most valuable finite and non-renewable resource known to humanity. Not money, not energy, not even information, because all of those can be replenished. Time cannot. 1.1 The irreversibility principle. A defining property of time is irreversibility. Once a moment passes, it is removed from all possible futures. This creates a strict asymmetry in human life. You can recover from financial loss. You can rebuild knowledge. You can restore relationships sometimes. You can heal physically sometimes. You can replace possessions. But you cannot recover time that has already been spent. This means every decision is not just an action. It is an irreversible allocation of existence. 1.2 Attention, the conversion mechanism of time. Time alone is passive. Attention is what converts time into experience. Where attention goes, life follows. This creates a critical hierarchy. Time exists as raw potential. Attention selects what becomes reality. Action expresses that selection. Memory encodes the result. Thus, attention is the most powerful force acting upon time. A person does not live their life in total. They live only the part of life they paid attention to. Everything else effectively does not exist in subjective experience. 1.3 Opportunity Cost. The hidden law of human existence. Opportunity cost is the most misunderstood principle in human decision-making. It is not just an economic idea, it is a universal law of reality. Definition. Every choice costs not only what you choose, but everything else you did not choose. When you spend 1 hour on any activity, you are not only spending that hour, you are permanently forfeiting all other possible uses of that hour. This creates an invisible but absolute structure. Every yes contains infinite no's. Every action eliminates alternative lives. Every focus collapses possibility into reality. 1.4 The invisible geometry of life. Most people evaluate decisions in isolation. Was this good? Did this feel worthwhile? Did I gain something? But the correct question is always comparative, compared to what else I could have done with the same time. Was this the highest value use of my existence? This is opportunity cost thinking. Without it, human decision-making becomes distorted. People confuse busy with productive, entertainment with restoration, comfort with value, habit with necessity, but life does not evaluate actions individually. Life evaluates trade-offs. 1.5 The attention economy of the self. Modern life is not just an economic system, it is an attention allocation system. Every entity competes for your time. People, media, work, entertainment, habits, thoughts, internal emotional loops. This creates a competitive environment where whatever captures attention, captures life. Thus, the most important skill in human development is not intelligence alone. It is attention sovereignty, the ability to decide what enters awareness, what remains there, what is excluded, what is sustained over time. 1.6 The compounding nature of time allocation. Time does not only pass, it compounds. Every repeated allocation of time builds structure, repeated attention beliefs, repeated behavior habits, repeated habits identity, repeated identity trajectory. This is why small decisions are not small. They are compounding investments in a direction of life. Two people may look identical for years, but their compounded time allocation eventually produces radically different lives. 1.7 The cost of misallocated time. The greatest human suffering is often not immediate pain. It is retrospective realization. I spent years on something that did not matter to me. I ignored what actually mattered. I was present physically but absent mentally. This is the emotional consequence of opportunity cost becoming visible too late. Regret is essentially the emotional recognition of mispriced time. 1.8 Time is the origin of all other pillars. Every other pillar in this framework depends on time. Love requires time to develop. Health requires time to maintain. Wisdom requires time to acquire. Discipline requires time to practice. Purpose requires time to discover. Wealth requires time to build. Relationships require time to sustain. Thus, time is not one pillar among many. It is the foundation that makes all other pillars possible. 1.9 The first principle of human optimization. From this chapter, a single governing law emerges. A human life is the result of accumulated opportunity costs made over time under conditions of limited attention. This reframes life completely. You are not defined by what you possess. You are defined by what you consistently chose, what you consistently ignored, what you consistently valued enough to invest time into. 1.10 The core question of Chapter 1. If this entire theory can be reduced to one operational question, it is this the highest value use of my finite time compared to all alternatives? Every decision becomes a trade-off evaluation against the total space of possible life trajectories. Closing of Chapter 1. Time is not just something you spend, it is something you become through accumulation. Every moment is a vote for the type of person you are becoming, and every vote has opportunity cost. End of Chapter 1. The Unified Theory of Human Flourishing. Chapter 2. Love, Relationships, and Community. 2.0 The second foundational truth of human life. If Chapter 1 establishes that human life is constructed from finite time, an irreversible opportunity cost, then Chapter 2 establishes what that time is primarily for in a biological and existential sense. Human beings are not optimized for isolation, they are optimized for connection. No amount of individual success fully compensates for relational emptiness. No level of material wealth fully replaces belonging. No achievement fully substitutes for being known, seen, and valued by others. Thus, after time itself, the second most important structure of human flourishing is love, relationships, and community. 2.1 The evolutionary reality of connection. Human survival was never an individual project, it was a cooperative system. Across evolutionary history, isolation meant vulnerability, cooperation meant survival. Trust meant food, safety, and protection. Belonging meant continuity of life. This created a deep biological truth. The human nervous system is designed to regulate itself through other humans. We are not self-contained systems. We are interdependent systems. 2.2 Love as a biological regulation system. Love is often misunderstood as purely emotional or romantic, but at its core, love is a stability mechanism. It regulates stress responses, emotional intensity, behavioral consistency, psychological resilience, motivation, and meaning. A human being in isolation must regulate everything internally. A human being in connection can regulate through shared systems, conversation, touch, presence, reassurance, shared experience. Thus, love is not an emotion added to life, it is a system that stabilizes life. 2.3 The structure of relational wealth. In the same way that financial wealth can be measured, relational wealth also has structure. Relational wealth consists of depth of trust, reliability of support, emotional safety, shared history, mutual investment, presence across time. A key insight: relationships are built through repeated investments of time under opportunity cost conditions. This directly connects Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. Every relationship is a record of how someone spent their finite attention over time. 2.4 The economics of attention in relationships. Relationships operate under a hidden economy. Attention is currency. Presence is investment. Consistency is compound interest. Neglect is withdrawal. Betrayal is bankruptcy. A strong relationship is not built from rare large gestures. It is built from repeated presence, repeated listening, repeated reliability, repeated care. This creates compounding trust. 2.5 The 5 modes of love expression. Human beings do not all experience love in the same form. Love is transmitted through multiple channels. 1. Words of affirmation. Love expressed through language, acknowledgement, encouragement, verbal appreciation, truth spoken with care. 2. Acts of service. Love expressed through effort, helping, supporting, solving problems, reducing burden. 3. Receiving gifts. Love expressed through material symbols, tokens of attention, meaningful objects, physical reminders of care. 4. Quality time. Love expressed through presence, undivided attention, shared experience, focused interaction. 5. Physical touch. Love expressed through the body, comfort, grounding, safety signaling, intimacy. These are not separate systems. They are different translation layers of the same underlying resource, attention over time. 2.6 Social capital. The hidden form of wealth. Beyond money, humans accumulate something more structurally important: social capital. The value of trust, reputation, and relational reliability. Social capital determines who will help you, who will trust you, who will support you, who will include you, who will protect you. Unlike money, social capital cannot be stored in isolation. It must be continuously maintained through behavior. 2.7 Trust is the core currency of civilization. At the deepest level, all relationships reduce to one variable: trust, the expectation that future behavior will be consistent with past behavior. Trust is fragile because it depends on prediction. Every action answers a question: are you safe to depend on? Are your words reliable? Are your actions consistent? Once trust is broken, rebuilding it requires disproportionate time investment. This is another expression of opportunity cost. Broken trust is not just loss, it is lost future potential relationships that never form. 2.8 Attachment, safety, and emotional security. Human relationships are shaped by early and ongoing attachment patterns. Secure connection stability and openness. Insecure connection anxiety or avoidance. Disorganized connection relational unpredictability. At the biological level, the nervous system treats connection as safety. When connection is stable, stress decreases, cognition improves, emotional regulation strengthens. When connection is unstable, hypervigilance increases, cognitive load increases, emotional volatility increases. Thus, relationship quality directly affects mental performance. 2.9 The opportunity cost of relational neglect. Just as time is governed by opportunity cost, so are relationships. Every neglected relationship implies lost trust accumulation, lost shared history, lost emotional safety, lost future support. But relational opportunity cost is often invisible until it becomes irreversible. People tend to realize too late that attention not given becomes distance, distance becomes disconnection, disconnection becomes absence. 2.10 The first law of relational flourishing. If Chapter 1 has its first law, Chapter 2 introduces its counterpart. Your relational life is the sum of the attention, trust, and emotional investment you repeatedly give to others over time. Relationships are not events. They are trajectories formed through repeated micro-decisions. 2.11 The core question of Chapter 2 At every moment, relational life asks a quiet question. Who are you becoming in the lives of others through your repeated presence or absence? Because every interaction answers: am I safe with you? Am I valued by you? Am I a priority in your attention economy? Closing of Chapter 2 If time determines what a life is made of, then relationships determine what that life feels like while it is being lived. Time creates existence. Relationships create meaning inside existence. End of Chapter 2. Unified Human Flourishing. Chapter 3. Physical Health, Safety, and Vitality. 3.0 The biological foundation of all experience. If Chapter 1 established that time is the fundamental non-renewable resource, and Chapter 2 established that relationships determine the emotional quality of that time, then Chapter 3 establishes something even more immediate. All experience is filtered through the body. Every thought you have, every emotion you feel, every memory you form, and every decision you make is constrained and shaped by your biological condition. The body is not a vehicle you own, it is the condition under which ownership becomes possible. 3.1 The body is the interface of reality. Human consciousness does not interact directly with the world. It interacts through a biological interface composed of nervous system, endocrine system, muscular system, cardiovascular system, immune system, metabolic system. This creates a foundational truth. You do not experience reality directly. You experience your body's interpretation of reality, which means fatigue alters perception, inflammation alters mood, sleep deprivation alters judgment, nutrition alters cognition, stress alters memory. Thus, biology is not background, it is active input into perception. 3.2 Health is cognitive enhancement. Health is often framed as physical well-being, but its deeper function is cognitive amplification. A healthy system provides clearer thinking, stable mood regulation, improved decision-making, increased emotional tolerance, better impulse control. A compromised system produces cognitive narrowing, emotional volatility, reduced foresight, increased reactivity. Therefore, health is not just survival, it is intelligence in physical form. 3.3 Energy is the true currency of action. While money is commonly treated as the primary resource in society, the body operates on a more fundamental currency: energy availability. Energy determines what you are capable of doing, how long you can sustain effort, how well you can resist impulses, how clearly you can think. Without energy, even simple tasks become expensive. With energy, difficult tasks become manageable. Thus, energy is the operational form of human potential. 3.4 Sleep, the master regulator of human function. Sleep is not rest in a passive sense, it is biological maintenance and system recalibration. During sleep, memory consolidates, emotional systems reset, metabolic regulation stabilizes, neural pathways reorganize. Sleep deprivation creates cascading failures, impaired judgment, emotional instability, reduced immune function, increased impulsivity. Therefore, sleep is the foundation upon which all other health behaviors depend. Without sleep, discipline collapses. Without sleep, focus collapses. Without sleep, emotional regulation collapses. 3.5 Nutrition, information for the body. Food is not just fuel, it is biochemical information. Every intake communicates energy availability, hormonal response, inflammatory status, cognitive stability. Poor nutrition does not only affect the body, it alters perception itself. Thus, what you eat becomes how you think. 3.6 Movement, the maintenance of capacity. The human body is designed for motion. Movement regulates metabolic efficiency, cardiovascular health, neurological function, emotional balance. A sedentary body gradually loses strength, mobility, resilience, endurance. A moving body accumulates capacity, stability, adaptability. Therefore, movement is not optional maintenance, it is continuous calibration of human ability. 3.7 Safety, the reduction of existential noise. Safety is often overlooked in discussions of flourishing, but it is foundational. When safety is compromised, attention narrows, stress increases, long-term thinking decreases, emotional stability declines. The brain prioritizes survival over optimization. Thus, a lack of safety converts life from growth-oriented to threat-oriented existence. 3.8 Physical affection and human regulation. Touch is not symbolic alone, it is physiological regulation. Safe physical contact can reduce cortisol, stress hormone, increase oxytocin, bonding hormone, stabilize heart rate, improve emotional grounding. This connects biology directly to Chapter 2. Physical connection is one of the most direct biological pathways to relational stability. 3.9 Pain, dysfunction, and attention capture. Pain is not just a sensation, it is a priority override system. When pain is present, attention is hijacked, cognition narrows, emotional tolerance decreases. This is important. The body can forcibly redirect your entire attention economy, which means physical suffering has direct effects on Chapter 1, time and attention allocation. 3.10 Health is compounding advantage. Health does not produce linear returns, it produces compounding returns. Better sleep improves cognition, better cognition improves discipline, better discipline improves habits, Better habits improve long-term health. This creates a reinforcing loop. Health improves behavior, and behavior improves health. 3.11 The opportunity cost of physical neglect. Just like time and relationships, health has opportunity cost. Neglecting health results in reduced future capability, reduced energy availability, reduced lifespan potential, reduced experience quality, but importantly, the cost is delayed, which makes it psychologically invisible until it becomes structural. People often trade long-term vitality for short-term comfort without recognizing the exchange rate. 3.12 The first law of physical flourishing. If we compress this chapter into a single principle, your lived experience is constrained by the condition of your body, and your body is shaped by the repeated behaviors you perform over time. This connects directly back to Chapter 1. Time creates behavior. Behavior creates biology. Biology creates experience. Closing of Chapter 3. The body is not separate from the mind. It is the physical foundation of mind. Without a functioning body, time cannot be used effectively. Relationships cannot be maintained well. Purpose cannot be pursued consistently. Thus, physical health is not one pillar among many. It is the enabling condition for all other pillars. End of Chapter 3. Unified Human Flourishing. Chapter 4. Service, Generosity, and Provision. 4.0 The shift from individual survival to collective flourishing. Chapters 1 through 3 established the internal architecture of human life. Time as the irreducible resource. Relationships as the emotional environment. Health as the biological foundation. Chapter 4 introduces a transition point. Human flourishing does not end at the individual. It expands outward into contribution. At a certain threshold of survival, the question changes from, how do I survive? To, what do I contribute? This is where meaning begins to stabilize at a higher level of complexity. 4.1 Service as the externalization of value. Service is the process by which internal capacity becomes external benefit. It includes effort directed toward others, problem solving for others, emotional support, material provision, protection, teaching, building, creating usefulness outside the self. In its simplest form, service is value made visible through action, where Chapter 1 focuses on time allocation, and Chapter 3 focuses on bodily capacity. Chapter 4 focuses on what that capacity produces for others. 4.2 The structural principle of generosity. Generosity is often misunderstood as moral optionality. In this framework, it is structural. Generosity is the controlled transfer of resources from one system of accumulation to another system of need. This includes time, energy, attention, knowledge, material resources, emotional support. Generosity is not loss. It is redistribution of value across a relational system. 4.3 Food is the primitive language of care. Across every culture and historical period, one of the most universal expressions of care is sharing food. Food carries multiple layers simultaneously: survival, biological necessity, trust, safety signal, hospitality, social acceptance, bonding, shared experience, memory formation, emotional encoding. To feed another person is to communicate. Your survival matters enough for me to reduce my own surplus for your benefit. This is one of the oldest and clearest signals of human cooperation. 4.4 Reciprocity systems and social balance. Human societies are built on implicit exchange systems. Help received creates obligation potential. Help given creates social credit. Repeated exchanges create trust networks. This forms a relational economy. Giving builds trust. Receiving builds obligation. Imbalance creates tension. However, the highest form of generosity is not transactional. It is giving without immediate expectation of return, while maintaining systemic balance over time. 4.5 Service is identity formation. Service does not only affect others, it reshapes the self. Repeated acts of service form identity through self-perception: I am someone who helps. Social perception: others see me as reliable. Behavioral reinforcement: I act in helpful ways. Thus, you do not simply perform service, you become the kind of person who serves. This connects directly back to Chapter 1. Repeated actions, habits, identity. 4.6 The economics of contribution. Service operates under its own economic logic. Time invested, value created. Energy expended, problem reduced. Attention given, emotional stability provided. But unlike traditional economics, the return is not always immediate or direct. Returns may appear as trust accumulation, strengthened relationships, reputation development, future reciprocity, internal meaning. Thus, service is an investment in relational and existential capital, not just material exchange. 4.7 Provision as stabilized generosity. Provision is structured service over time. It includes consistent support, reliable contribution, long-term responsibility, predictable assistance. Where generosity may be spontaneous, provision is sustained. Provision creates stability in relationships, predictability in communities, reduced uncertainty in survival systems. 4.8 The moral and structural dimensions of giving. Service contains both ethical and structural dimensions. Ethical: compassion, empathy, care, responsibility. Structural: system stability, resource redistribution, network resilience. A society with no service collapses under imbalance. A society with consistent service stabilizes and grows. 4.9 The opportunity cost of contribution. Just like time, relationships, and health, service involves opportunity cost. Every act of service implies time not used elsewhere, energy not used elsewhere, resources not retained. This creates an important insight. All contribution is a trade-off between self-directed and other-directed value. However, unlike simple loss, service often generates delayed returns in trust, connection, meaning, social resilience. 4.10 The first law of contribution. If we reduce this chapter to its core principle, human flourishing increases when individual capacity is converted into meaningful benefit for others through sustained acts of service and provision. This creates a feedback loop. Capacity enables service. Service builds relationships. Relationships reinforce meaning. Meaning increases motivation. Motivation increases capacity. 4.11 The deep integration with previous chapters. Service depends on all previous pillars. Time. Chapter 1. Service requires time allocation. Relationships. Chapter 2. Service strengthens bonds. Health. Chapter 3. Service requires energy and stability. Thus, service is the outward expression of internal structure. It is where inner life becomes visible in the external world. Closing of Chapter 4. Service is where human beings stop being isolated systems and become integrated parts of a larger whole. It is not secondary to survival. It is what transforms survival into civilization. End of Chapter 4. Unified human flourishing. Chapter 5. Truth, communication, and integrity. 5.0 Language as the operating system of human reality. Human beings do not experience civilization directly. They experience it through language. Everything that exists beyond immediate perception is mediated through communication. Laws, promises, relationships, science, identity, money, culture, history. All of these are sustained by one invisible infrastructure. Shared meaning encoded in language. If language collapses, civilization collapses with it. 5.1 Words as reality building tools. Words are not just descriptions of reality. They are instruments that construct it. A few examples. A promise creates a future obligation. A law creates behavioral constraints. A diagnosis reshapes identity and treatment. A declaration of love alters relational structure. A lie distorts shared perception. Thus, language does not only represent reality, it actively participates in creating it. 5.2 Truth is system stability. Truth is not only a moral ideal, it is a stabilizing force. A system built on truth has predictability, trust, coordination, long-term coherence. A system built on falsehood develops uncertainty, distrust, fragmentation, collapse of coordination. Therefore, truth is the alignment between language perception and reality. 5.3 The fragility of shared meaning. Human cooperation depends on shared interpretation, but meaning is fragile because it exists in minds, not in physical objects. This means misunderstanding is always structurally possible. Therefore, civilization requires constant maintenance of shared meaning through communication. 5.4 The first agreement, integrity of speech. A key principle aligned with the four agreements is, be impeccable with your word. In structural terms this means, speak with precision, avoid intentional distortion, align speech with truth, avoid careless harm through language. Speech is not neutral. It either strengthens or weakens relational reality. 5.5 Assumptions as hidden errors in communication. One of the most destabilizing forces in human relationships is assumption. Assumptions occur when missing information is replaced with interpretation. Interpretation is treated as fact. Fact is never verified. This creates cascading distortions, miscommunication, emotional reactions to false beliefs, unnecessary conflict. Thus, unverified assumptions are low-resolution substitutes for truth. 5.6 The discipline of clarification. Clarity is an active process. It requires asking questions, verifying meaning, restating understanding, correcting interpretation, clarification reduces, conflict, misunderstanding, emotional distortion, it increases, alignment, trust, cooperation. 5.7 Emotional weight of language. Language is not emotionally neutral. Words carry tone, history, relational context, perceived intent. This means the same sentence can build trust or destroy it depending on delivery and context. Therefore, communication is not only informational, it is relational engineering. 5.8 The second agreement, emotional depersonalization. Aligned with the four agreements, one core principle is do not take things personally. Structurally, this means not all communication is about you. Many signals originate from other people's internal states, stress responses, unresolved emotional patterns, contextual pressures. Thus, personalization of external behavior often introduces false causality. 5.9 The third agreement, the collapse of assumed knowledge. Aligned with the same framework, do not make assumptions. This creates a cognitive discipline. Uncertainty is acknowledged. Questions replace conclusions. Curiosity replaces interpretation. In structural terms, assumptions are premature compressions of incomplete data. 5.10 The fourth agreement, behavioral integrity. Also aligned with the four agreements, always do your best, but best is not static. It depends on energy levels, knowledge available, emotional state, situational constraints. Thus, integrity is context-sensitive effort aligned with capacity. 5.11 The fifth principle, critical awareness. From the fifth agreement, be skeptical, but learn to listen. This introduces dual cognition. Skepticism prevents deception. Listening prevents ignorance. A balanced mind must hold both. Too much skepticism leads to isolation. Too much acceptance leads to confusion. 5.12 Trust is the product of communication integrity. Trust is not created by intention, it is created by consistency between words, actions, expectations, outcomes. Thus, trust is the accumulated prediction accuracy of a person's communication over time. 5.13 The opportunity cost of false communication. Miscommunication carries hidden cost. Time spent correcting errors, emotional repair work, lost opportunities, damaged trust, reduced future coordination. Thus, false communication is not just incorrect, it is time destruction disguised as interaction. 5.14 The first law of communication. If reduced to a single principle, human coordination is proportional to the accuracy and integrity of shared language over time. Closing of Chapter 5. Language is not just a tool, it is the architecture of shared reality. Every relationship, system, and civilization depends on its stability. To speak truthfully, listen carefully, and avoid distortion is not merely ethical, it is structural maintenance of human reality itself. End of Chapter 5. Unified Human Flourishing. Chapter 6. Knowledge, Wisdom, and Intellectual Growth. 6.0 The human mind is a reality modeling system. Human beings do not experience reality directly, they experience a model of reality constructed in the mind. This model is built from perception, memory, language, belief, inference, emotion. Thus, to change your life, you must change the model through which you interpret life. This is the core function of knowledge and wisdom. 6.1 Knowledge versus wisdom. A critical distinction. One of the most important distinctions in human cognition is knowledge. Knowledge is stored information, learned facts, recorded observations, data accumulation. Wisdom. Wisdom is applied understanding, contextual judgment, pattern recognition, integration of experience. Thus, knowledge is having information, wisdom is knowing what it means and when it applies. A person can have vast knowledge and still make poor decisions. A wise person may have limited information but high-quality judgment. 6.2 Learning is compression of experience. Learning is not just accumulation, it is compression. The mind takes repeated experiences, repeated observations, repeated failures, and compresses them into principles, heuristics, beliefs, mental models. Thus, learning reduces the complexity of reality into usable internal structure. 6.3 Cognitive bias and the distortion of reality. The human brain does not process information neutrally. It uses shortcuts, heuristics, that introduce distortion. Common distortions include confirmation bias, availability bias, emotional reasoning, overgeneralization, pattern hallucination. These biases are not bugs, they are evolutionary features optimized for survival, not truth. Thus, the mind is not designed for accuracy, it is designed for survival efficiency. Wisdom requires correcting for this mismatch. 6.4 Truth updating and intellectual honesty. A key feature of high-level intelligence is the ability to update beliefs. This requires willingness to be wrong, openness to new evidence, detachment from identity-based beliefs, emotional tolerance of uncertainty. Thus, intelligence is not what you know. It is how you change what you know when reality disagrees with you. 6.5 The cost of intellectual rigidity. When belief systems become rigid, learning slows, adaptation decreases, decision quality declines, conflict increases. Rigid thinking creates ideological imprisonment, emotional defensiveness, rejection of evidence. Thus, the inability to update beliefs is a form of cognitive stagnation. 6.6 Curiosity is the engine of growth. Curiosity is the driving force behind intellectual expansion. It is characterized by willingness to explore uncertainty, desire to understand systems, attraction to complexity, tolerance for not knowing. Curiosity transforms ignorance into inquiry, confusion into learning, mystery into structure. Thus, curiosity is the emotional fuel of intelligence. 6.7 Mental models as internal simulation systems. Humans use mental models to simulate outcomes before acting. Examples: predicting consequences, evaluating decisions, imagining future scenarios. A strong mental model reduces error, improves prediction, enhances decision-making. A weak model produces confusion, leads to repeated mistakes, misinterprets feedback. Thus, wisdom is the quality of your internal simulations of reality. 6.8 Information versus understanding. Information is abundant, understanding is rare. Information: external, stored, transferable. Understanding: internal, integrated, experiential. Thus, information tells you what exists, understanding tells you how it behaves. 6.9 Learning is a function of time and attention. Returning to Chapter 1. Learning requires time investment, attention allocation, repeated exposure, reflection. Thus, intellectual growth is a direct function of how you allocate finite time and attention. Opportunity cost applies strongly here. Every hour spent consuming low-value information is an hour not spent developing understanding, an hour not spent building skill, an hour not spent refining judgment. 6.10 The role of intellectual humility. Intellectual humility is the recognition that your knowledge is incomplete, your perspective is limited, your beliefs may be wrong. This creates cognitive flexibility. Without humility, learning becomes defensive, disagreement becomes threat, growth becomes impossible. Thus, humility is the precondition for intelligence to evolve. 6.11 The first law of intellectual flourishing. If compressed into a single principle, human cognitive quality is determined by the accuracy, adaptability, and integration of the mental models used to interpret reality over time. Closing of Chapter 6. The mind is not a container of facts. It is a living system of models that continuously updates, refines, and reconstructs reality. Knowledge provides raw material, wisdom provides structure, and the quality of that structure determines the quality of every decision a human being will ever make. End of Chapter 6. Unified Human Flourishing. Chapter 7. Emotional Mastery and Inner Peace. 7.0 The inner world is the primary battlefield. If earlier chapters established that time determines what you can do, relationships determine how life feels socially, health determines biological capacity, language determines shared reality, knowledge determines understanding, then Chapter 7 establishes something deeper. The human experience is ultimately filtered through emotional state. Two people can live identical external events and experience completely different realities based on internal emotional conditions. Thus, emotional mastery is the control layer of human experience. 7.1 Emotion as a biological prioritization system. Emotions are not irrational noise. They are evolutionary priority signals. Each emotion redirects attention. Fear threat detection, anger boundary enforcement, sadness loss processing, joy reward reinforcement, shame social correction signal, anxiety future uncertainty scanning. Thus, emotion determines what the mind treats as important. Emotion is not optional. It is the interface between biology and cognition. 7.2 Suffering is mismatch between reality and expectation. Most human suffering does not come from reality alone. It comes from the gap between what is happening and what we believe should be happening. Thus, suffering is the cognitive dissonance between expectation and experience. This means suffering is partially structural, not purely external. 7.3 The emotional economy of attention. Returning to Chapter 1. Attention is finite. Emotions compete for that attention. Anxiety consumes future attention. Regret consumes past attention. Anger consumes reactive attention. Joy expands present attention. Thus, emotional states are competing bids for control of attention. 7.4 Emotional reactivity versus emotional response. A key distinction: reactivity, automatic, impulsive, stimulus-driven, short-term, often destabilizing. Response, deliberate, contextual, value-aligned, long-term oriented. Thus, emotional mastery is the shift from reaction to response. 7.5 The role of awareness in emotional regulation. You cannot regulate what you cannot observe. Awareness creates space between stimulus and reaction. That space is where choice exists. Thus, awareness is the foundation of emotional freedom. Without awareness, emotion becomes identity. With awareness, emotion becomes information. 7.6 Identity fusion and emotional overload. Many emotional struggles arise when people confuse "I feel something" with "I am this thing." Examples: feeling fear, I am weak. Feeling anger, I am bad. Feeling sadness, I am broken. This fusion creates shame cycles, avoidance behavior, emotional suppression. Thus, emotional suffering increases when states are mistaken for identity. 7.7 Emotional regulation as system stability. Emotional regulation is not suppression. It is stabilization. It involves recognizing emotional signals, interpreting them accurately, responding in proportion, returning to baseline. Thus, regulation is not elimination of emotion. It is restoration of balance. 7.8 The nervous system. As a predictive engine, the human nervous system constantly predicts danger, reward, social response, future outcomes. When predictions are stable, calmness emerges. When predictions are unstable, anxiety increases. Thus, emotional stability is largely a function of perceived predictability. 7.9 The compounding effect of emotional states. Emotions are not isolated, they compound. Repeated stress, chronic anxiety. Repeated gratitude, baseline contentment. Repeated resentment, identity rigidity. Repeated compassion, emotional flexibility. Thus, emotional patterns become personality structures over time. 7.10 Inner peace is the reduction of internal conflict. Inner peace is not absence of emotion. It is absence of internal contradiction. It occurs when values align with actions, expectations align with reality, identity aligns with behavior. Thus, peace is structural coherence within the mind. 7.11 The opportunity cost of emotional dysregulation. Unstable emotional states consume resources, attention, decision quality, relational stability, physical energy. Thus, emotional instability is a continuous tax on all other forms of human capital. This connects directly to Chapter 1. Emotion determines how time is experienced and allocated. 7.12 The first law of emotional flourishing. If reduced to a single principle, human well-being is determined by the ability to observe, regulate, and integrate emotional experience without being controlled by it. Closing of Chapter 7. Emotion is not a flaw in human design. It is the system that determines what matters. But without mastery, it becomes a system that determines everything. With mastery, it becomes information instead of domination. End of Chapter 7. Unified human flourishing. Chapter 8. Purpose, meaning, and spiritual connection. 8.0 The existential requirement beyond survival. If the earlier chapters establish time as the limiting resource, relationships as emotional structure, health as biological capacity, language as shared reality, knowledge as cognitive structure, emotion as internal control system, then Chapter 8 introduces a final requirement. Human beings require meaning in order to function at full capacity. Without meaning, the system does not stop operating, but it degrades. People can survive without purpose, but they do not flourish without it. 8.1 The difference between survival and meaning. Survival answers, how do I continue existing? Meaning answers, why should I continue existing in this way? This distinction is critical. Survival is biological, meaning is psychological and existential. Thus, survival keeps the body alive, meaning keeps the mind organized. 8.2 Meaning is cognitive architecture. Meaning is not abstract philosophy. It is structural organization of perception. It determines what matters, what is ignored, what is worth suffering for, what is worth pursuing, what is interpreted as success or failure. Thus, meaning is the framework that organizes experience into coherence. Without meaning, experience becomes fragmented. 8.3 The human need for directionality. Human cognition is directional. The mind is constantly projecting future goals, imagined outcomes, hypothetical selves. Without direction, attention becomes scattered, motivation collapses, behavior becomes inconsistent. Thus, purpose is the stabilizing vector of consciousness. 8.4 Suffering requires meaning to be endurable. One of the most important functions of meaning is not pleasure, it is endurance. People can tolerate pain, uncertainty, loss, hardship, only when these experiences are embedded in a meaningful structure. Thus, meaning transforms suffering from randomness into narrative. 8.5 Values as the core of identity. Values determine priorities, decisions, boundaries, identity consistency. Without values, behavior becomes reactive, identity becomes unstable, decisions become situational. Thus, values are the internal rules that define who you are across time. 8.6 Purpose as directed contribution. Purpose is not just internal feeling, it is external orientation. It answers, what am I contributing to? What am I building? What am I responsible for improving? Thus, purpose is the alignment of action with perceived significance. 8.7 The role of legacy in human psychology. Humans are unique in their awareness of mortality. This creates a secondary motivation system. Beyond survival, beyond immediate reward, we care about what remains after us, what we influence, what we build that persists. Thus, legacy is time extended beyond biological limits through impact. 8.8 Spirituality is pattern recognition beyond the self. Spirituality in this framework is not restricted to religion. It is recognition of interconnectedness, perception of larger systems, awareness of continuity beyond individual identity. Thus, spirituality is the experience of being part of a system larger than the self. 8.9 Meaning is a defense against existential collapse. Without meaning, the mind experiences fragmentation, disorientation, apathy, nihilism. This is not philosophical, it is functional degradation. Thus, meaning prevents psychological disintegration under complexity. 8.10 The opportunity cost of meaninglessness. Returning to Chapter 1. Time is always being spent. Without meaning, time is spent without direction. Effort is expended without coherence. Experience lacks integration. Thus, meaninglessness converts time into unstructured loss, rather than structured development. 8.11 The first law of meaning. If reduced to a single principle, human experience becomes coherent and sustainable when individual existence is embedded within a larger narrative of value, direction, and contribution. Closing of Chapter 8. Meaning does not eliminate suffering. It organizes it. It does not remove uncertainty. It gives uncertainty direction. It does not guarantee outcomes. It makes outcomes matter. End of Chapter 8. Unified Human Flourishing. Chapter 9. Responsibility, focus, dedication, discipline, and excellence. 9.0 The execution layer of human life. If the previous chapters define what you have, time, health, what you experience, emotion, relationships, how you understand, knowledge, meaning, and why you act, purpose, then Chapter 9 defines the final bridge, how intention becomes reality. This is the execution layer of human existence. Most people do not fail at meaning, they fail at execution. 9.1 Responsibility, ownership of causality. Responsibility is the recognition that your life is not happening to you, it is being shaped by you. This does not mean all circumstances are controllable. It means your response is always yours, your decisions are always yours, your direction is always yours. Thus, responsibility is the acceptance of causal authorship over your actions. Without responsibility, behavior becomes externalized, blame replaces action, identity becomes passive. With responsibility, agency becomes active, change becomes possible, life becomes editable. 9.2 Focus, the concentration of finite attention. From Chapter 1. Attention is the mechanism that converts time into life. Focus is the deliberate narrowing of that mechanism. In a world of infinite distraction, everything competes for attention, nothing guarantees importance. Thus, focus is the strategic allocation of consciousness toward what matters most. Focus requires exclusion of irrelevant stimuli, prioritization of goals, resistance to interruption, sustained cognitive alignment. Without focus, time fragments, effort disperses, progress stagnates. 9.3 Dedication, commitment across time. Dedication is not intensity, it is continuity. It is the ability to remain aligned with a goal when motivation disappears, novelty fades, difficulty increases, rewards are delayed. Thus, dedication is the persistence of direction across changing emotional states. Most systems fail not from lack of ability, but from discontinuity of effort. 9.4 Discipline. Behavioral consistency under resistance. Discipline is execution under friction. It is the ability to act in alignment with values despite discomfort, fatigue, emotional resistance, environmental distraction. Thus, discipline is the conversion of intention into repeated behavior regardless of internal resistance. Motivation is reactive. Discipline is structural. 9.5 Excellence. The compounding of refinement. Excellence is not a destination. It is a trajectory. It emerges from repetition, correction, refinement, feedback integration. Thus, excellence is the long-term accumulation of improved execution over time. Excellence requires humility to recognize error, patience to improve gradually, consistency to sustain effort, courage to iterate repeatedly. 9.6 The interdependence of the five forces. These five systems are not separate. They form a causal chain. Responsibility, ownership of action. Focus, direction of action. Dedication, continuity of action. Discipline, consistency of action. Excellence, compounding of action. Thus, execution is a layered system of control over behavior across time. 9.7 The psychology of inconsistency. Most failure is not due to lack of knowledge. It is due to inconsistency. Knowing but not doing. Intending but not sustaining. Starting but not continuing. This creates fragmentation between identity, behavior, goals. Thus, inconsistency is the breakdown between cognition and action. 9.8 The opportunity cost of undisciplined time. Returning again to Chapter 1. Every moment of undirected behavior has opportunity cost. Lost progress, lost compounding, lost identity formation. Thus, undisciplined time is not neutral. It is negative compounding against future potential. 9.9 Execution as identity formation. Behavior is not just output, it is identity construction. Repeated actions define who you believe you are, who others believe you are, what you are capable of becoming. Thus, you do not act according to identity, you form identity through action. 9.10 The first law of execution. If reduced to a single principle, human potential is realized through the sustained alignment of responsibility, focus, dedication, discipline, and iterative excellence across time. Closing of Chapter 9. Execution is where philosophy becomes biology, where intention becomes behavior, where meaning becomes structure. Without execution, all other pillars remain theoretical. With execution, they become real. End of Chapter 9. Unified Human Flourishing. Chapter 10. Material and Financial Security. 10.0 The stabilization layer of human existence. If the previous 9 chapters describe time as the foundation of life, relationships as emotional structure, health as biological capacity, service as outward contribution, truth as communicative integrity, knowledge as cognitive structure, emotion as internal regulation, meaning as existential orientation, execution as behavioral realization, then Chapter 10 introduces the final stabilizer. Material and financial security is the system that reduces existential uncertainty in the physical world. It is not the highest form of human value, but it is the most universally required infrastructure for sustaining all other forms of value. 10.1 Money as a condensed representation of labor and time. Money is often misunderstood as value itself. In structural terms, money is stored labor, stored time, and stored coordination. It represents past effort, future potential, social agreement. Thus, money is not intrinsic value, it is compressed claim over human time and energy. 10.2 The function of material security. Material security reduces 3 major stressors: survival uncertainty, resource instability, environmental vulnerability. When these are reduced, cognitive bandwidth increases, emotional stability increases, long-term planning becomes possible. Thus, material security is the reduction of survival-related noise in consciousness. 10.3 The hierarchy of material needs. Before high-order human functioning becomes stable, basic needs must be met: food, shelter, safety, healthcare access, stability of environment. Without these, attention is consumed by survival, emotional regulation weakens, execution becomes inconsistent. Thus, scarcity dominates cognition until basic security thresholds are reached. 10.4 Financial systems as time allocation systems. Returning to Chapter 1. Since time is the fundamental resource, financial systems are ultimately systems for distributing human time and effort across society. This means wages equals exchange of time, markets equals coordination of attention, labor equals structured time investment, savings equals delayed time utilization. Thus, Economics is a large-scale coordination system for human time under scarcity conditions. 10.5 Opportunity cost in financial life. Every financial decision is a time decision in disguise. Spending now versus saving future opportunity. Investing effort versus consuming resources. Choosing one path of income over another. Thus, financial decisions are compressed opportunity cost decisions. Poor financial decisions often reflect misallocated time, misallocated attention, misaligned priorities. 10.6 Wealth is optionality, not accumulation. True financial wealth is not just accumulation. It is the expansion of possible future choices. This includes freedom of time, freedom of location, freedom of labor, freedom of decision making. Thus, wealth is the degree to which future time is unconstrained by present necessity. 10.7 The psychological impact of scarcity. Scarcity does not only limit resources, it reshapes cognition, reduces long-term thinking, increases impulsivity, increases stress sensitivity, narrows attention. Thus, scarcity is a cognitive distortion system, not just a material condition. 10.8 Material security, and all other pillars. Material stability directly supports all previous pillars. Time reduces survival distraction. Relationships reduces stress-induced conflict. Health enables access to care and nutrition. Service enables capacity to give. Truth reduces survival-based deception pressure. Knowledge enables education access. Emotion reduces chronic stress load. Meaning allows focus beyond survival. Execution stabilizes consistency over time. Thus, material security is the environmental foundation upon which all higher-order human functioning depends. 10.9 The ethical dimension of wealth. Wealth is not morally neutral in its effects. It can be used to stabilize systems, support others, increase opportunity, reduce suffering, or to concentrate power, distort systems, increase inequality, amplify instability. Thus, the ethical value of wealth is determined by its direction of use, not its existence. 10.10 The first law of material flourishing. If reduced to a single principle, human flourishing increases when material and financial resources are structured to reduce scarcity-driven cognitive load and expand long-term optionality. Closing of Chapter 10. Material security is not the meaning of life. It is the condition that allows life to be lived with clarity, stability, and choice. Without it, the mind is dominated by survival. With it, the mind becomes available for higher-order flourishing. End of Chapter 10. Final synthesis. Optional next step. Complete system. Unified human flourishing, full system. Final synthesis. Human flourishing system. 1. Model. System of human life. Human life can be understood as a stack of interdependent systems. Foundational layer, constraint systems. Time. Chapter 1. Health. Chapter 3. Material security. Chapter 10. Relational layer, external systems. Relationships. Chapter 2. Service. Chapter 4. Communication. Chapter 5. Internal layer, cognitive plus emotional systems. Knowledge. Chapter 6. Emotion. Chapter 7. Directional layer, motivation systems. Meaning. Chapter 8. Execution layer, output systems. Responsibility, focus, discipline, etc. Chapter 9. 2. Causal chain of human life. All human outcomes emerge from one continuous chain. Time, attention, action, habit, identity, life trajectory. But this chain is modulated by emotion, what feels important; knowledge, what seems true; relationships, what is reinforced socially; health, what is physically possible; meaning, what is worth doing; material stability, what is feasible without survival pressure. Thus, human life is a multivariable system operating on finite time under competing internal and external constraints. 3. The 10-pillar integration map. 1. Time system. Chapter 1. Opportunity cost, attention allocation, irreversibility. 2. Relationship system. Chapter 2. Trust accumulation, emotional bonding, social capital. 3. Biological system. Chapter 3. Energy, health, physical capability. 4. Contribution system. Chapter 4. Service, generosity, provision networks. 5. Communication system. Chapter 5. Truth, language integrity, shared meaning. 6. Cognitive system. Chapter 6. Knowledge, wisdom, mental models. 7. Emotional system. Chapter 7. Regulation, stability, inner coherence. 8. Meaning system. Chapter 8. Purpose, Values. Spiritual direction. 9. Execution system. Chapter 9. Discipline. Focus. Responsibility. Excellence. 10. Material system. Chapter 10. Financial stability. Resource security. Survival reduction. 4. System interdependence. Critical insight. No pillar is independent. Each pillar is both a result of other pillars and a cause of other pillars. Examples. Poor health reduces discipline. Weak relationships distort emotional stability. Lack of money reduces cognitive bandwidth. Poor communication destroys trust. Lack of meaning weakens execution. Thus, human flourishing is not linear improvement. It is system alignment. 5. The primary failure mode of human life. Most human dysfunction arises from one condition. One or more systems dominate, while others degrade. Examples. Wealth without health collapse. Discipline without emotion burnout. Meaning without execution frustration. Relationships without truth instability. Knowledge without action stagnation. Imbalance produces instability. Coherence produces flourishing. 6. The opportunity cost principle, universal law. Across all systems, every choice is an irreversible allocation of finite time under constraint. This applies to attention, relationships, health habits, financial decisions, emotional responses, communication, meaning making. Thus, life is the accumulation of opportunity costs you never notice in real time. 7. The flourishing equation, conceptual model. Human flourishing increases when time x attention quality, x health stability, x relationship integrity, x communication accuracy, x knowledge quality, x emotional regulation, x meaning clarity, x execution consistency, x material security, are aligned rather than in conflict. 8. Final principle of human flourishing. If reduced to a single statement, a human being flourishes when finite time is repeatedly allocated with increasing awareness, coherence, and discipline across biological, relational, cognitive, emotional, and material systems in alignment with meaningful purpose. 9. Closing statement. This framework is not meant to be believed. It is meant to be tested, not as theory, but as lived structure, because ultimately, human life is not defined by what you understand. It is defined by what others and yourself consistently do with the time we can't get back.